Welcome to Sinister Stories, where the shadows move, the rules matter, and what you don't see is sometimes the scariest part. If you love a good scare, stick around, because once you hear these stories, you'll never sleep the same way again. Subscribe, if you dare. I took this job because it was easy money. Sit behind the counter, sell overpriced snacks, and maybe pretend to clean something if my manager, Greg, checked the cameras. Greg's a sweaty dude who smells like Marlboros and regret. When he hired me, he said, "Night shifts are chill, just follow the rules." I thought he meant corporate stuff like, don't steal the Snickers or pretend the hot dogs aren't 3 days old. Nope. He meant a list of bizarre, handwritten rules taped to the register. If a customer asks for gas but doesn't have a car, do not serve them. The man in the blue truck will arrive at 2:37 a.m. He does not pay. Fill his tank and do not look at his face. If you hear knocking from inside the ice freezer, do not open it. Check the security cameras every hour. If you see yourself on the screen, wave. If the other you doesn't wave back, clock out and leave immediately. The gas pumps shut off at midnight. If one turns back on by itself, do not go outside. If a woman in a red dress asks to use the bathroom, tell her it's out of order. If she insists, lock yourself in the supply closet until she's gone. I laughed out loud. Is this a joke? Greg took a long drag of his cigarette. Follow the rules or you'll end up like the last guy. I was about to ask what happened to the last guy, but Greg left before I could. Fine. Whatever. I clocked in, cracked open a Mountain Dew, and settled in for an easy shift. At first, everything was normal. Some truckers came in for coffee. A dude with meth head energy spent 10 minutes debating between Cool Ranch and nacho cheese Doritos. Then, a man walked in wearing basketball shorts, a hoodie, and no shoes. Pump 3, he said. I looked outside. There was no car at Pump 3. You sure? I asked. He stared at me. His eyes were too wide, too empty, like someone had scooped out whatever makes a person human. I glanced at the rules. Rule number 1, do not serve them. I cleared my throat. Sorry, man, system's down. No gas tonight. He didn't blink, didn't move. Just stood there for a long, uncomfortable minute before turning around and walking into the dark. I watched him until he disappeared behind the pumps. He never came back. I had almost forgotten about rule number 2 when I saw the headlights pull in. A big, old blue Ford truck rumbled up to Pump 4. The driver's side window was rolled down, but I couldn't see inside. Just darkness. I grabbed the pump and stepped outside. The air felt heavier, wrong. It smelled like burnt plastic and gasoline, like the road after a bad wreck. I kept my head down as I started filling the tank. The urge to look inside was overwhelming, like my brain was screaming, "Just a quick glance, no big deal." Then, the driver spoke. "Long night?" His voice was static, like a radio tune to dead air. My whole body locked up. I focused on the gas pump, pretending I didn't hear him. He sighed. "You're smarter than the last guy." The pump clicked off. I stepped back, eyes still down, and walked back inside. When I glanced out the window, the truck was gone. No headlights, no engine noise. Just gone. I checked the register. There was no record of any gas sale. I was going to be out of this shift the second Greg showed up, but at 3 a.m. something knocked from inside the ice freezer. I froze. Knock, knock, knock. Nope, nope, nope. I grabbed my phone and pretended to text, ignoring it. The knocking stopped. Then, "Hey, man, you gonna open this or what?" The voice was right outside the glass door. I didn't look, didn't breathe. "Come on, dude, just open the door." I could see my reflection in the freezer glass. Behind me, there was no one there. "Fine," the voice whispered. "I'll see you next time." The air turned cold. My reflection didn't move right away when I did. I bolted to the back room and locked the door. Remember rule number 5? The pump shut off at midnight. 3:15 a.m. Pump 6 beeped. Someone had started fueling. I pulled up the security cameras. The pump was running by itself. The hose was floating, held up by nothing. Then the screen glitched. A person appeared at pump 6, but their face was blurred out, like my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. The pumps shut off. The figure turned toward the store. I killed the lights, locked the door, and hid under the counter. Greg pulled up at sunrise. I unlocked the door, walked past him, and clocked out without a word. "You followed the rules?" he asked. I nodded. Greg just chuckled. "Good. See you tonight." Tonight? I should have quit. I should have left and never come back. But the $18 an hour was too good, and my rent was due. So, like an idiot, I showed up the next night. After what happened last night, the barefoot guy, the truck driver with the radio static voice, the knocking inside the freezer, I should have called Greg and told him to find another idiot. But rent was due, and Shell was paying me $18 an hour to sit behind a counter and pretend I wasn't scared out of my mind. So I came back. Greg was waiting for me when I got there, sitting behind the counter like a bloated toad. "So, you survived night 1? He took a long drag of his cigarette, exhaling through his nose. "Thought you might run off like the last guy." I wanted to ask, what happened to the last guy? But I already knew I wouldn't like the answer. Instead, I just muttered, "Yeah, well, I need the money." Greg grinned, but it wasn't friendly. "Tonight's worse." My stomach dropped. "Worse how?" He stood up, stretching. "You'll see." Then he walked out and left me alone. The night started out normal, if you ignored the fact that I was terrified out of my mind. A trucker came in and bought a blue Gatorade, a hot dog that had been rolling since Tuesday, and a pack of Marlboros. Some teenager tried to shoplift a Monster, but I saw him tuck it under his hoodie and made him put it back. Then, at 12:37 a.m., the automatic doors slid open. A woman walked in. She was tall, with jet black hair and pale skin that looked almost artificial, like she was made of wax. And she was wearing a long, blood-red dress. My heart stopped. Rule number 6. If a woman in a red dress asks to use the bathroom, tell her it's out of order. If she insists, lock yourself in the supply closet until she's gone. She walked up to the counter, smiling just a little too much. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was smooth, almost too perfect, like someone had run it through an auto-tune filter. "May I use your restroom?" I swallowed hard. "Sorry, out of order." She kept smiling. "Oh, that's a shame," she said. "Are you sure?" Something in my brain screamed at me to run. I forced myself to nod. "Yeah, pipes burst. No bathroom tonight." She tilted her head, studying me. Then she leaned forward, resting her hands on the counter, and I saw her fingernails were too long, too sharp. "Lying is rude, you know," she whispered. The lights flickered. My legs moved on their own. I bolted to the back room, slammed the supply closet door shut, and locked it. Outside, I heard her heels clicking on the tile. Click, click, click. She stopped right outside the door. "Are you scared?" she asked, her voice smooth as glass. I didn't answer. She giggled. Then, silence. I stayed inside for 20 minutes. When I finally came out, the gas station was empty. But on the counter, where she had been standing, there was a single red high heel. I grabbed it with a pair of tongs and threw it straight in the dumpster. I was still shaking when I checked the security cameras. I needed to see it for myself. That she was real. That I wasn't losing my mind. I rewound the footage to 12:37 a.m. The doors slid open, but there was no one there. I saw myself talking to nothing, my mouth moving, my eyes darting in fear. Then I ran to the back. For 2 minutes, the store was empty. And then, a single red high heel appeared on the counter. Out of nowhere. The video glitched. When it came back, there was someone standing behind me, I was still trying to process the footage when the gas station rumbled. Headlights flooded the front windows. The blue truck was back. I froze. Rule number 2. The man in the blue truck will arrive at 2:37 a.m. He does not pay, fill his tank, and do not look at his face. The truck sat at pump 4, engine running. I grabbed the pump and walked outside, my breath fogging in the cold. I didn't look at the window this time. The smell of burning plastic was even stronger than last night. I filled the tank, fighting the urge to look. Then, from inside the truck, a woman laughed. My whole body locked up. The driver whispered something. "Did you let her in?" I felt like I was going to throw up. The pump clicked off. I didn't even put it back. I just turned and walked inside, locking the door behind me. The truck was gone before I could blink. The rest of the shift was quiet. Too quiet. At 4 a.m., I checked the security footage again. There was a man standing at the counter. He wasn't there in real life. I watched myself on the screen, just sitting behind the register, playing with my phone. Completely unaware. The man leaned closer to the camera. His face blurred into static. Then he turned and walked into the supply closet, the one I had locked, the one I was about to clean. I snapped my head toward the door. It was wide open. I left the mop where it was and didn't touch that closet for the rest of the night. Greg pulled up at sunrise, stepping out of his car with a fresh cigarette. I clocked out and walked past him without a word. "You followed the rules?" he asked. I stopped. "Yeah." Greg grinned. "Good. You've got one more night." I turned. "One more?" His smile faded. "Most people don't make it past 3. I stared at him. I should have quit. I should have walked away. But something about the way he said it, like it was a challenge, made me stay. I didn't sleep when I got home. I just sat in my apartment staring at the wall, replaying everything from the past 2 nights. The barefoot man who asked for gas with no car. The knocking from inside the ice freezer. The blue truck driver who spoke in radio static. The woman in the red dress, who wasn't on the cameras but still left her shoe behind. The man on the footage who stood behind me, but never existed in real life. Greg said most people don't make it past night 3. I wasn't sure if that was because they quit or because something took them. When I showed up for my shift, Greg was waiting behind the counter, drinking a Red Bull like he actually did work around here. "You're back," he said, looking surprised. "I need the money." Greg nodded, tapping ash from his cigarette. "Tonight's when it gets bad." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "Worse than last night?" He just sighed and handed me a new note, written in his sloppy handwriting. "If someone knocks on the front glass, do not look at them. They aren't real. At 3:14 a.m., check pump 6. If the screen says unknown sale in progress, go to the back room and stay there until it stops. You may hear someone whispering your name over the intercom. Do not answer." I stared at the note. "You serious?" Greg took a long sip of his Red Bull. "You're lucky I even warned you." Then he left, and I was alone. The first 2 hours were uneventful. I started thinking maybe Greg was just messing with me, trying to psych me out. Then, at 12:30, it started. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the front windows. I froze. Rule number 1. If someone knocks on the front glass, do not look at them. They aren't real. The knocking continued. Software patient. My hands gripped the counter. I stared at the register, pretending I couldn't hear it. Then they whispered my name. "Hey, open up, man. We just need some gas." I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. "Come on, dude. Just open the door." The voice was familiar. Too familiar. It sounded like me. I shut my eyes. The air felt thick, pressing against me like I was underwater. Then, silence. When I finally opened my eyes, the knocking was gone. But on the window, written in fog, was my name. I tried to push through the rest of the shift, but I kept checking the clock. At exactly 3:14 a.m., I forced myself to look outside at pump 6. The screen was glowing green. I swallowed hard and walked closer. Instead of the normal payment screen, it said, "Unknown sale in progress." That wasn't supposed to happen. There was no car, no customer. And yet, the pump was fueling something. The air shimmered, like heat rising from pavement. A shape began forming, just out of view, something standing right outside the range of the security lights. I saw its shadow first, tall, thin. Its arms were too long. I ran to the back room, slamming the door behind me. The air buzzed like an old radio losing signal. Then, all at once, the pump clicked off. When I went back outside, the screen was blank, like nothing had happened. But there was a single wet footprint by the pump, barefoot, just like the man on the first night. I was done. I decided the second Greg showed up, I was quitting. But then the intercom crackled. "Hey." I stared at it. The button wasn't pressed. "You there?" It was my voice. I grabbed my phone and recorded the intercom because I knew Greg would never believe me. "I know you can hear me." I didn't answer. The intercom hissed like static. Then, "I'm looking at you." The security TV glitched. For 1 second, I saw myself on the screen, except my reflection was smiling. I wasn't. Greg pulled up at sunrise. I clocked out without a word. He lit a cigarette. "See anything weird?" I pulled out my phone. "You tell me." I played the recording. The intercom hissed. Then, clear as day, my own voice spoke back to me. Greg listened and then handed me my next paycheck. "So, you quitting?" I should have, but I didn't, because when I checked my bank app, my pay rate had doubled. $36 an hour. Greg grinned. "Management likes you. That's why they're paying you more." "Management?" I asked. "Who's management?" His grin faded. "You don't want to know." That should have been my cue to run, but I didn't, because now I was making too much money to leave. And whatever was running this place, they wanted me to stay. I should have quit the second I saw that paycheck. $36 an hour. Nobody pays that for a gas station job unless there's a catch. And I was starting to realize that the catch was my sanity. Greg called it management. I didn't know who or what that meant. But I had a feeling that if I stayed long enough, I'd find out. Or worse, they'd find me. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was that the supply closet door was open. That was impossible. I had locked it myself before I left. I stepped closer. The air was cold and something smelled off, like rotting wood and burned plastic. I nudged the door open with my foot. The light inside flickered. There was something on the floor. A shoe. Not just any shoe. A Shell employee sneaker. The exact ones Greg and I wore. Except this one looked old, torn, like it had been down there for decades. I reached down to pick it up. The light went out. I swore I heard breathing. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I didn't check inside again. I was trying to keep my mind off the closet when I noticed something on the counter. A new note. Greg hadn't been in all night. I hadn't seen or heard anyone come in. But there it was, folded neatly, waiting for me. At 2 a.m., a phone will ring. Do not answer it. If you do, they will know your voice. I flipped the paper over. Nothing on the back. Just one simple rule. The store phone was right next to me. It hadn't rung in the past 3 nights, which meant that whoever or whatever left this note knew that it was going to. I spent the next hour pretending I wasn't watching the phone. But as the clock struck 2 a.m., the damn thing rang. The sound sliced through the silence. I stared at it. It was an old corded phone, the kind you'd find in your grandma's kitchen. Ring. I knew I wasn't supposed to answer, but my body wanted to. It wasn't just curiosity, it was something stronger. A feeling like if I didn't pick up, I'd regret it forever. My hand hovered over the receiver. Then, a voice came through the speaker. "Hello?" It was my voice. Not similar, not close. Exactly my voice. I ripped the cord out of the wall. The phone kept ringing. The phone stopped ringing after a few minutes, but I was too freaked out to sit still. I got up, walked the aisles, pretended to clean. Then I saw him. A man standing in the back of the store. He wasn't shopping. He wasn't moving. Just standing there. He was wearing an old shell uniform, the kind from the 80s, with a faded red and yellow jacket. His head was slightly tilted, like he was listening for something. I felt my stomach drop. He wasn't there a second ago, and his feet weren't touching the ground. I took a step back. The lights flickered. The man twitched. Then, he slowly turned his head toward me. I didn't stick around to see his face. I ran to the counter, locked the front door, and turned off the lights. When I looked back, he was gone. But there was a fresh set of footprints leading to the supply closet. I sat behind the counter, clutching a Red Bull like a stress ball. I kept telling myself, 1 more hour. 1 more hour, and I'm done. Then, the security cameras glitched. The screen flickered, showing the store from different angles. Aisle 1, Aisle 2, front counter, storage room. That one made me pause. The camera wasn't pointed at the supply closet, but the door was open, wide open, and in the middle of the storage room, there was someone standing there. Their back was to the camera, but they were wearing my uniform. The screen glitched again. When it came back, the figure was closer to the camera. Another glitch. Closer. The next time, the figure was staring directly into the camera. It was me. The screen went black, and from the back room I heard the supply closet door creak open. Greg pulled up as the sun rose, stepping out of his car and lighting a cigarette. I clocked out without a word. He grinned. Still alive? I didn't answer. Greg held out a new paycheck. I almost didn't take it, but when I saw the amount, my hands moved on their own. $50 an hour. Greg took a long drag of his cigarette. Management's impressed. I stared at the check. $50 an hour for a gas station job? Who the hell is management? I asked. For the first time, Greg actually looked nervous. Don't ask that question. Then he got in his car and drove off. I should have left. I should have taken my money and ran. But I didn't. Because now I needed to know. I needed to know who or what was really running this place. I wasn't supposed to ask about management. Greg made that clear. But after everything I'd seen, the whispering intercom, the man floating in the aisle, the thing in the supply closet that looked like me, I wasn't just scared anymore. I was angry. I wanted answers. And the only way to get them was to break the rules. When I got to the gas station, Greg was waiting. But this time, he wasn't behind the counter. He was standing by the ice freezer, smoking like a man waiting for bad news. You shouldn't be here, he said. I shrugged. Rent's due, Greg sighed. He pulled out a final note and handed it to me. If you see a man in a black suit enter the store, do not speak to him. Do not make eye contact. If he asks you a question, pretend you cannot hear him. If you break any of these rules, you will be promoted. I frowned. Promoted? Greg took a long drag of his cigarette. You don't want the promotion. Then he walked away and left me alone. I was so focused on watching the door that I didn't notice what had changed inside the store. The shelves were different. Not messy, just wrong. Rows of energy drinks where the chips used to be. The hot dog rollers were clean. The security cameras were facing the wrong direction. It wasn't until I checked the cooler that my stomach dropped. Every bottle in the fridge, every single one, was branded with my name. Ethan's water, Ethan's soda, Ethan's 2% milk. I slammed the door shut and backed away. Something was watching me. The door chimed. I froze. A man walked in. Tall, pale, black suit. He had no eyebrows. His face was too smooth, like someone had airbrushed the human out of him. I held my breath. He strolled up to the counter and placed his hands flat on the surface. Good evening, he said. I didn't answer. His smile widened. I asked you a question. I stared at the register. The lights dimmed. The air turned heavy, pressing against me like I was being buried alive. Ethan. I clenched my jaw. You're ready for the promotion. My hands gripped the counter. I didn't mean to, but my eyes flicked up, just for a second. He was grinning. The lights flickered, and suddenly the store was full. Dozens of people standing silently in the aisles. They weren't shopping. They weren't moving. They were all just staring at me. Their eyes were black. Their mouths were too wide. "Congratulations," the man whispered. The ground beneath me disappeared. I don't know where I am. The gas station is gone. I'm standing in a room with no walls, just shelves. Endless shelves, stretching into the dark. The products are wrong. The labels have names instead of brands. Andrew's potato chips, Maria's bottled water, Kevin's gasoline, and at the very end of the aisle, there's a shelf with my name on it, Ethan's Energy. Inside the cooler, there's a single bottle of bright red liquid. I don't want to open it. I don't want to know what's inside. But I don't think I have a choice, because behind me, the man in the black suit is waiting, and he's still smiling.